Humans enjoying the suffering of others is, well, as old as the ancient Romans baying for blood when they'd send in the lions at the Colosseum. Now, though, the mob seems to have moved online. Just as Donald Trump threatens to slam nations that try to regulate the World Wide Web, France is coming to grips with last week's death of a 46-year-old online personality, Raphaël Graven, who went by the name of Jean Pormanove, JP. He died after 12 days of a marathon live stream where viewers were encouraged to contribute to keep the broadcast going. We'll ask about the death of the streamer who earned a living by subjecting himself to verbal and sometimes physical abuse. Also, about the platform where he broadcast, Curaçao-registered, Australian-based Kick, founded in 2022 after gaming platform Twitch tightened its moderation. In this case, the antics and abuse had been flagged already. Yet, after a brief suspension, the channel returned and the show went on. What does this story say about the world we live in today? Is it about the profiteers or the otherwise ordinary people, most of them men, who watched, everyone from loners to football stars? Today in the France 24 debate, we're talking about the outrage over the live stream death of Jean Pormanove. With us, Tech24 host Peter O'Brien. Thanks for being with us.
Hi, Francois.
Thanks as well to Jessica Garisser, senior policy researcher at the IT think tank Interface. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
From Oslo, clinical psychologist Evelyn Lindner, founding president of Human Dignity and Humiliations Studies Association. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And from Rotterdam, Danielle Trottier, associate professor in the Department of Media and Communications at Erasmus University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You can always, by the way, listen, like, and subscribe to the France 24 debate wherever podcasts are streamed. Yeah, the French state already had a criminal probe open against the two live streamers who would regularly abuse JP. Now it's announced this Tuesday it's weighing a case against the platforms that host their channel. Let's begin with a recap by Antonia Kerrigan.
After months of physical violence and humiliation on the Le Local group's Kick channel, 298 hours into a live stream, one of the group's other members reached for a bottle to throw at Jean Pormanove to wake him up. But the 46-year-old streamer had died in his sleep. Authorities have come under fire for failure to prevent the months of violence in plain sight.
The death of Jean Pormanove and the violence he was subjected to are absolutely horrific. My condolences are with his family and his friends. Jean Pormanove was humiliated and mistreated for months during live streams on the platform Kick.
The group consisted of Pormanove, a former soldier, Koudou, who has disabilities, and the two ringleaders, Naruto and Safine. The latter two came under investigation after website Mediapart shone a light on the channel last December. They were briefly taken into custody in January, but after both Pormanove and Koudou refused to undergo medical or psychiatric evaluations and told investigators they were participating freely in an enterprise Pormanove said was making him up to €6,000 a month, the streams continued on the platform Kick.
The platform Kick has a reputation as a bit of a Wild West and also an El Dorado for streamers who no longer have a place on other platforms.
Kick posted to X that they were deeply saddened by Pormanove's death, promising to cooperate fully with the authorities and undertake a full overhaul of their French-language content, also banning the rest of the Local group from the platform pending the results of the investigation.
And since we filed that report, Peter O'Brien, we've had a preliminary autopsy. No sign of physical abuse, but there's still further tests and results to come.
Yeah, that's right. The autopsy has revealed no apparent direct harm done by a third party. However, that's not to say that he was not the victim of any abuse or any violence, right? That's not what it means. They're going to do further studies, toxicological and other medical studies to show whether his existing symptoms. For instance, he had thyroid problems. He also had heart problems. These have been reported. Whether these were exacerbated in some way, one of the things he was made to do on stream was ingest potentially toxic material. So they're still studying the potential medical causes of his death.
What is more surprising in this story, the cruelty inflicted upon him, or the fact that people paid to keep this marathon live stream going?
I think, as you pointed out in your intro there, perhaps if we look at the history of humanity, it's not exactly surprising that people will enter a kind of almost cult-like mindset around violence directed towards people. It goes back to antiquity. We have even in modern technology, phases of this kind of thing happening as soon as each technology comes along, right? So there was a famous case in the 90s with a Japanese TV show where a guy was sent to the brink of starvation, and he was trapped, live streamed in a similar kind of way, and would have to kind of complete certain magazine challenges to even get food sent to him. We therefore then, when radio was fairly unregulated, we used to have the kind of public humiliation that was carried out here. But so you could say it's another example of a kind of people banding around wanting to watch violence inflicted on other people. However, that doesn't mean it's not shocking. And to see it happening in such a blatant way, and with such a lack of action taken by the police specifically, we know that they intervened in the very room, or at least the house where these facts were taking place, 5 times in recent months. We know that they interviewed the victims and the perpetrators of this violence and did not take any sanctions. So that to me is what's shocking. Of course, it's shocking to see the kind of violence that we saw, the slappings, hittings, the fact that he was locked in a boot of a car and driven over speed bumps. He was shot at with paintball guns. And a lot of this was for financial, a result of people's donations. You could donate so that he would clean up other people's crap in the toilets. You could donate so that he would slap the other poor fellow who was a victim of this, Kudu, the mentally disabled victim in this case. It's just shocking. It's just shocking. It doesn't make it any less surprising that this happens again and again, and it doesn't make it any easier to watch and hear about, even though we know that this kind of stuff has gone on throughout history.
All right, 2 of the streamers, as you say, bullied. 2 of the streamers, the bulliers. The lawyer for one of them, 23-year-old Safin Hamadi, claiming that some of what the viewers saw was in fact scripted, a bit like pro wrestling.
Once again, we're dealing with videos that I personally don't like, but they had their audience. It's what's now called trash streaming. And what worked best, according to my clients and the feedback that we received, because this case is widely discussed, is that the more violent the content on screen, the better it performed. These streamers understood that very well. What was expected of them was violence, and that's why he was the most targeted, even though they were all sometimes victims of violence. JP was the one being subjected to such violence, sometimes even announced in advance. People would send encouragements, even donations, and the reactions became increasingly widespread.
Jessica Gallicia, a work accident? People pointing. Earlier I went on Telegram where they have these group chats, and some of them saying, "Yeah, JP was, he was paid €6,000 a month." They claim, or is this something more sordid?
No, I think it's definitely surprising, and I couldn't agree more with what was just said before, that the police investigation didn't go actually further, because as you said, they intervened 4 or 5 times in the house where the violence was taking place. And then one of the biggest argument that is put forward is that he consented to the violence that was inflicted upon him. But from what I've read about the case, apparently in some of the latest streams that he took part in, it wasn't so clear. At some point, he was forced to say that if something happens, it's not the fault of the acts he is being infliged upon. So I don't want to investigate, in the place of the police, but there's, I think, definitely something to be dig in this regard as to what maneuver did he have exactly, and was it really a free choice, or was he forced in a way? Because I think in one of the streams he mentions like he feels like he's trapped and he doesn't have a choice anymore. So of course, if they have this kind of hold over him and it's his only source of income, and the other person also was handicapped, so the two bullies, as you call them, they obviously targeted vulnerable people. So I think the investigation should tell more about this in the coming days. To me, it's not a work accident, definitely.
Evelyn Lindner, what is this about? Is it about what happened during the live stream, or is it about the viewers who paid to keep this live stream going?
I think it is a combination. It comes two factors come together. As was said before, we have had experiences of cruelty, culturally sanctioned cruelty in history. You are in Paris now, and cats were being burned alive. I think those who have studied history do know that in the 17th century, cats were associated with the devil, and it was enjoyed to burn them alive. And so it was sanctioned cruelty. And we could say that we can be very thankful that we as humanity have moved out of that. What we see now is, you could say, economically sanctioned cruelty. And again, we are at a place where we have the responsibility to move out of that.
You talk about sort of a progress of humanity. We don't burn cats in Paris anymore as a spectator sport. But is that progress of humanity now perhaps reversing? Because people watch things that are virtual and lines get blurred between what's acceptable and what's not.
Yes, I think what is needed is awareness of humiliation and its how explosive it is, how explosive it has become. And there is a paradox there. Human rights ideals of equal dignity intensify feelings of humiliation. Many people are not aware of that, how much feelings of humiliation have become more explosive. I call feelings of humiliation the nuclear bomb of the emotions. And you might say, oh, how come that human rights ideals of equal dignity for all can increase humiliation? Yes. And there, it might be now not the time to explain how it happens. It happens that if you expect to be treated as equal, as part of a human family where everyone is equal, and then your equal dignity is being violated, then the feeling of humiliation is much, much, much more intensive, more painful than in the past, when you could say, oh, it's nature's order that I'm being mistreated, or it's God's will, or something like that. So we live in new times where a new awareness of the explosivity of feelings of humiliation is needed.
It's also mob rule to a certain degree, right? Because the people who are paying to watch this, some of them said they were rooting for JP, but most were kind of egging on the acts of humiliation that we've been talking about. The internet is made up of so-called communities. Are these communities in fact mobs?
Yes, it could be called like that, and again, it is a kind of economically sanctioned and intensified working out and inciting humiliation. It's humiliation entrepreneurship, I call it that. Humiliation entrepreneurship, to use the vulnerability of people and the strength of these feelings. These feelings are so strong, and therefore it is so profitable to show them. So this profitability is being used, and so it is humiliation entrepreneurship. And what I see in this case is that this humiliation entrepreneurship is happening everywhere. And this case now is kind of the canary in the coal mine, because we see this kind of humiliation entrepreneurship more and more everywhere in our societies on all levels. So this is just one example, and it is extremely important to, from my point of view, to learn to be aware of, first, the fact that humiliation is extremely explosive now, the feelings, therefore they are so profitable, and that our economic interests, heighten them further. And this is, I think, a path that is extremely dangerous for society. And this particular case is just one case.
So, Danielle Trottier, you just heard there, Evelyn Lindner, scapegoating is in, it's a trend. Why is that such a trend in the digital age?
Yeah, I think just given all the different sort of humiliations, to pick up on this key word, and crises and struggles that people are facing in any context, we're looking at this and we're looking for some sort of blame, someone to hold accountable, either directly if we're, denouncing someone, but also just to, and I'm not a psychologist, but just to sort of sublimate those feelings and find an easy target. So if we're looking at the 500,000 people who are spectating this, we can't put ourselves in their heads and speculate what they were going through. But in a lot of cases, I wouldn't be surprised to learn that many of them, were also sort of suffering themselves. And this, was a way to kind of, find an appropriate target.
Well, let me ask you about this, because forensics on who was among those watching has turned up some startling revelations. There were past cameos by star footballer Adil Rami, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and Bradley Barcola, the latter two still active footballers, one for Marseille, the other for Paris Saint-Germain. Are they just see this as entertainment, Daniel Trottier? I know you're not in their heads, but what does that tell you?
I think this is the exact moment of reckoning when I would hope that nobody who's watching this live stream was anticipating or hoping that it would end this way. But now looking back on it, whether we're talking about these particular athletes, any of the other, 499,000 people who are involved, have to ask themselves, how did it get to this point, and why are we deriving enjoyment out of this? So, I think we have to acknowledge that the audience is active in that sense, that they can either reward or report this kind of footage. At the same time, people don't always respond rationally when they're looking at something that's either upsetting or even traumatizing.
I really recommend people go and check out the great work that Mediapart has done on this. One of the articles they put out.
The news outlet that first blew the whistle.
Fantastic French investigative outlet. They put out an article where they interview some of the regular people who have watched for many years JP and have donated to the stream. And the takeaway that I got from that article is they are deluded. They are completely deluded. It's almost like they're in a cult, right? They speak along the lines of, you couldn't possibly understand unless you're part of the in-group. And I can only think of these people, young men, a lot of them, as perhaps having been bullied themselves. And this is their way of kind of getting their own back on someone else.
Well, because you watch for hours and hours and it becomes familiar, and you feels like even though you're not on the other side of the screen, that you're kind of part of the community, part of the family even.
Yeah, and I think for most people, for most of us, we find it shocking to look at this kind of footages. But it's also a realization of the communities that are out there. And for instance, I just learned 2 days ago that some people pay to see some child sexual abuse material, and for some child to be abducted and raped online, and some people also pay and
a live stream,
and watch these kind of things, and the kids are being exploited in very poor countries, sometimes in poor families that don't have, it's a very critical situation, and we as I don't want to say normal people, but people who find this kind of situation shocking, we don't realize that all this exists, but there is an audience for this. And I think it's tragic, of course, but at least it's a realization that this is out
And what?
there.
It's because we live in an age where it's easy for people who are very radical or very deviant to connect with one another thanks to the internet?
Probably. I don't want to enter the debate of the question we hear often, should we blame the real world or the digital world? But the internet is definitely an enabler because it connects audiences much faster than it did before. And yeah, people can talk to each other, connect more easily, and things get viral much more faster as well. And here I think it was the most viewed channel in France on Kick. So it tells a lot.
Yeah, live streaming comes from gaming, and improbably long viewer-funded online events, by the way, are not always nefarious. Take, for instance, Drive My Bus. It's a very simple video game where you pretend to drive a bus across a continent in real time. Not very much happens except stopping, I guess, for fuel and food. Users in this case, this is one from last year, were encouraged, you see the number of how much money has been raised, to cough up to keep the ride going. The proceeds going to the Petit Prince charity that helps sick children, Peter O'Brien. So again, these long format live streamed events, a bit akin to when cable news channels had reality TV shows on all night in the 2000s.
If only people still watched cable news rather than these live streams, we'd be doing a lot better business. But no, of course, there are millions and millions of people who watch these streams around the world. It gives them a sense of belonging. It makes them feel understood. They get to watch, maybe they're at work, right? Or at school or something else, and they want to watch people play a game that they like and have heard of, right? Yeah, there are many, many good things on these channels, right? Like, Kick is particularly badly regulated. We know that. It's emerged as a kind of bit of a toxic alternative to Twitch because it is so unregulated. And I should say, by the way, founded by the co-founders of a gambling website called Stake. So the primary vehicle of Kick, once it's started out, was to drive more people to gamble on the website Stake. So many red flags there to begin with. Of course, there are positive communities on these things, but also we should look out for when these positive aspects are co-opted by nefarious actors. So what did we also see on JP's stream? We saw charitable fundraisers. So at points, people could donate to give money to various charities, and it legitimizes them and it makes them look like they're running, at first glance, this is the kind of stuff that's promoted, but it really only took a few hours to watch to really understand what was going on. And the fact that so many average people don't understand these entire worlds of streaming and of gaming, that's what's really worrying. It's a problem of understanding. And you saw it there in the transcript or the clip of the gendarme who came in and at one point
they were prank called, right?
Well, there were a few different instances.
So that viewers prank called so that the gendarmes would show up and they get a kick out of seeing the gendarmes show up after they were the ones who made the prank.
That wasn't all of the times. It's something called swatting, and it comes from American streaming. So the idea is you'd call the SWAT force, the American armed police, by pretending there was some sort of, terrorism or violence going on, and then they'd knock down the door and everyone watching could have a big laugh because the police would come in and interrupt the stream.
Except for the SWAT team, which has other things to do.
Right, so the police, in this instance, the French police came in, didn't knock the door down, but they went into the room forum where they were streaming, and one of them says, can you please tell your, I don't know how to call them, followers that they're being silly, we've got other things to do. And even in the way he said that, it kind of betrays a misunderstanding among the average people trying to do their jobs, like the police, as to what these platforms are and what kind of thing really goes on them.
All right, that brings us to the question of how to regulate it. And there's a legal precedent, by the way, for shutting down spectacles of abuse here in France, even when the abused, once again, is complicit. 1995, a short person lost his case before the Council of State to keep his job as the fodder for so-called dwarf tossing contests. He insisted it was his livelihood, but the Council of State, France's highest administrative court, ruled that the respect of human dignity is part of the makeup of public order. The respect of human dignity as a legal right that should be enshrined. Your thoughts on that, Evelyn Lindner?
Yes, I'm all for that. I think this is what is needed because at the moment, I think we have economic systems that are not dignity, that don't prioritize dignity. And this is what we need very, very easily. We cannot regulate against this profit motive. We cannot regulate against it at the moment, I think. It's too strong. And just the regulations always are too late and too little. And there will always be loopholes because there is so much money to be made there. So the regulations will never be enough. And it's not just in the case of digital humiliation or whatever. It's all over in our societies. So the only way is really to make economic systems that prioritize the respect for human dignity. And not just for human dignity, the dignity for all living beings.
That link between human dignity, again, in that 1995 ruling, and public order, can you explain that to us?
It depends on what you mean by public order and human dignity. You have two groups of people. Some people would say humiliation is needed to make public order. In the past, we had that. Humiliation was routinely employed to keep hierarchical societies stable and in place. So we live now, this is what I meant by the way that human rights ideals of equal dignity revolutionize our thinking. Now you and I and all of us, we would think, no, routine humiliation is not a way to stabilize hierarchies. No, we want different kinds of societies where equal dignity is respected, where dignity is defined as equal dignity for all. So this is the transition in which we live globally in all societies. We live in this transition, and this is a transition that has pitfalls, and humiliation is one of the big pitfalls there.
Daniel Trottier, is it mission impossible to uphold that respect for dignity when you're online? Things like the WhatsApp, when you're in a chat group, there's always in and out behavior. It's always about who's in and who's out very quickly. How do you codify this human dignity?
Yeah, I think if you were to ban a platform like Kik and then JP couldn't get his 6,000 euros a month and you sort of do away with that sense of duress, you also have to ensure that people have access to dignity in a much more general sense so that they're not forced to do this. I think in terms of the online, spaces like WhatsApp and otherwise, you have in groups and out groups, you have exclusion, you have shaming, sometimes for good reason against things like animal cruelty, against child sexual abuse. But I think when we look at this case, we have to ensure that we can look back on this as a low point in platform development. So now that the cat is out of the proverbial bag, this is out of the dark web, I don't want to focus too much on the person himself, but on this case as something that we're able to teach and prepare people how to react when they see cases like this.
And by the way, here in France, there's still an argument over whether authorities can react. The head of the French broadcast and online regulator on Sunday claimed that the Arcom, that's our equivalent of Ofcom or the FCC, did not have the authority to block Jean Pormanove's online channel because the channel was hosted by an Australian platform, which has no representation in France. Now, though, this Tuesday, the Digital Affairs Minister saying she'll be going after Kik for, quote, breaching the French law on digital trust.
I believe Kik did not do everything in its power to stop the spread of dangerous content. So we're going ahead with this legal action, and we will make sure all the services involved fulfill their duties as quickly as possible. As you know, an investigation is underway, and we're monitoring the situation very closely.
But Jessica Garisser, we're sitting in France, Kik is in Australia. Is that just an empty promise by a politician we just heard?
It depends on which authorities exactly go after Kik and what if it's a court prosecution. I think things have a chance of going forward. As to does Arcom has competence over this? No. The president of Arcom is right when he says that the platform is hosted in Australia, and according to the Digital Services Act, which puts obligations on platforms.
This is Europe's online regulation.
At EU level, the DSA, it's not one of the biggest platforms, so it's not overseen by the European Commission. And so France doesn't have either competence over it because it's not hosted in France. But they were supposed to appoint a legal representative in one of the EU member states. A few days ago, they said they appointed one in Malta, but apparently when asked, the Maltese authorities said they never received such a notification. So it's a bit blurry for now as to who is responsible and whether they actually have a legal representative.
And if there is none, if there's none in Malta or anywhere else in the 27, what do we do? What do the French authorities do?
Then I guess they're in breach of the DSA for a start, and so perhaps the EU can act also on this level. But the French authorities, to me, it could only go forward if it's some kind of legal action in breach of the French law, not the DSA.
And the Supreme Court in Paris has opened their own investigation, which tells me that they've looked at the footage finally and decided that it's worthy of investigating. Because let's be honest, when you see the footage, you think the police, the justice system can and should deal with this. For some reason, the Nice prosecutors didn't get round to acting before JP died, but hopefully there can be some justice.
Despite there being, again, an open criminal investigation. And this brings us to what you alluded to earlier. If you follow the money, it goes far, well, very far. Kik itself doesn't make a lot of money, it claims, but it helps promote its parent company that Peter was referring to, Stake, founded by 29-year-old Australian Ed Craven and 30-year-old Iranian-American Bijan Tehrani. They met while online gaming a decade ago. They met and they built an online gambling site that uses crypto and counts among its ambassadors the likes of Canadian rapper Drake and masculinist streamer Aiden Ross. What does this tell you, Peter?
What it tells you, if you need to get if maybe you're an investigator out there, you want to, dig up something juicy on any potentially dodgy companies, just look at who's sponsoring F1 each year. We saw their Kik Sauber team. Stake is a big partner as well.
And we showed that front page of Forbes. They didn't seem to be dissing the co-founders. They seem to be hailing them as a success story.
Yeah, and also the fact that Drake and Aiden Ross have now offered so kindly to sponsor the funeral of JP leaves a bit of a bitter taste in the mouth when you know that Drake is a stakeholder in Kik. So the whole thing is just reputation management, isn't it?
Reputation management. Your thoughts on this, Daniel Trottier? How strong a case can the French build, and what is it about this link between this platform, crypto, gambling?
I could speculate that a lot of the people watching this probably blew a lot of money on crypto and gambling and were deriving some enjoyment from this. But I think just the magnitude in terms of the amount of viewers, the amount of months that this went on and the outcome means that, yeah, I think regardless of legal frameworks or what's permitted, I think, yeah, the French authorities really need to deliver a message in terms of, yeah, this was a low point and it should remain a low point, and not starting a precedent.
Now, while the French try to build a case against the platform domiciled on the other side of the planet, the President of the United States on Monday put out a post on his social medium, Truth Social, in which he said he put all countries with digital taxes, legislation, rules, or regulations on notice that unless they're removed, I will impose substantial additional tariffs and institute export restrictions on our highly protected technology and chips. Show respect to America and our amazing tech companies, or consider the consequences! Exclamation point. Jessica Gadisser, Europe, which needs the United States to not drop its support for Ukraine. We've seen that they've already made a lot of concessions when it comes to already trade negotiations. Is the DSA in danger? Is it under threat?
I don't think so. From the previous negotiations, what comes out of it is that it's not up for negotiation, and I think it's actually a very good test for the EU at the moment to see if it actually has the means to uphold its own rules that it just adopted. The DSA is 2 years old. It's been in force since just over a year and a half. So I would like at least to see a strong stance from the EU. And when Donald Trump says we'll impose tariffs or we will put restrictions on visas for the EU officials that are in charge of this regulation, the EU should be in a position to say, so what? And
they should be, but will they?
It's a complex situation because it's mixed with all the political and geopolitical tensions. And so it's a much broader topic. And I think the problem here is the dependence from the EU on the US. And so I think if we want to be able to stand up to the US at some point, it will take years and years, but Europe needs to be independent from the United States, and including in a defense-wise, because I think it's one of the first time that this tech policy is up for negotiations because we're not independent. So it's a huge problem.
Danielle Trottier, the whole panel is unanimous here that this is something that's glaringly wrong, that this live stream was able to happen. There are prosecutors trying to do something about it under public pressure. Again, will Donald Trump save the day for Kik by saying, don't you dare try to go for more tech regulation?
I mean, this extended period of abuse is indefensible. I don't even think Donald Trump could spin it in a way that would make it the least bit palatable, or, yeah, I mean, certainly not him.
Peter O'Brien.
Do I think Trump will defend Kik? No, it's not an American.
No, not Kik itself, but the idea, will Trump double down against any attempts to put a legal framework on this?
Yeah, but you got to remember, he will be under pressure from his allies, the tech bosses in the US, who are harmed by sanctions on European technology users, because guess what? They're using American tech. So if you make it more difficult for them to use American technology services, American technology companies are going to be harmed.
All right, and at this point in time, there's always going to be some other platform. In the case of Kik, it's because the regulation came to Twitch, the popular online gaming site. So is it always a losing battle, or are we finally beginning to understand, or the panel here has talked about how authorities didn't quite understand what they were up against in the case of JP. Are they beginning to grasp it? Will it become easier to regulate?
I think what's interesting is that this happened in France. We don't speak enough about regulation of these platforms in languages other than English, and it's very telling that we've had this happen on a Australian, primarily English language platform, but in French, where Kik itself has admitted they weren't doing enough to oversee what was going on in French. I think this happens time and time again, where niche alternatives to mainstream platforms, run into scandals in languages other than English, and it's just another reason why we should be looking at tech stories not just in America but here in Europe. Even though I'm at risk of plugging our work here at France 24, but I do think it's time the world paid a bit more notice as to what goes on outside of the US.
And there are deeper questions, Evelyn Linder, that are being asked. The numbers of hours that we spend scrolling, attempts by countries like Australia to ban social media for people under the age of 16. The fact that on Twitch itself, there was a study that came out last year that showed that nearly half the people who are on it suffer from, they say, from increased loneliness. Again, it's been now more than nearly 2 decades that these social media have become mainstream. Are we beginning to tackle these issues of how it's affecting our psyche?
I think the loneliness epidemic that we have in Western individualistic societies, this loneliness epidemic would be there also without the digital world. And the digital world is a rescue for lonely people. And again, it's the economic systems that do that to us. And we need global action. As you discussed, you said, what can France do? France being dependent on the US. The US will change someday, and France can go be a model. I think we need to hold human dignity and the dignity of all living beings as a beacon of for the future, to hold it as much as we can. And this would also answer to the loneliness epidemic.
The loneliness epidemic, there is this element, Daniel Trottier, though, of the fact that you get drawn in to the virtual world. If you're lonely or vulnerable, you're easier prey.
Absolutely. We can talk about these live streams, podcasts, etc., as windows to the world or as friendship simulations. So you have to kind of focus on the content itself, the effect it has on us, the dopamine hit, but you also have to step back and think about the kind of circumstances that lead people to be in front of these screens, to scroll through this content on such a multi-hour per day basis. So if you pull the thread, you see it's a much bigger problem. And we talked about the loneliness epidemic, Donald Trump, trade wars. It's obviously a much bigger issue.
Jessica Guérisseur, which is it? Is it a window on the world, or is it a friendship simulator, as Daniel was saying?
It's a very hard question to answer. It's obviously both. But I think at some point we will definitely need to tackle the issue of the business models of these platforms. Same goes for the social media platforms. It's the attention economy that builds on views, the number of views that you make, and the ad tech system as well. And this is something that we want to actually research with one of my colleagues. So I think the DSA is already quite progress in trying to regulate these platforms. But there's definitely some next steps to be undertaken, and the DSA itself will be reviewed next year. So there's room for improvement.
Next week here in France, school starts, and they're going to try to curb the phones in middle schools, ban them, in fact, trying to make it a blanket ban. Is this the right conversation, that we have to protect children, or is it the whole of the population, the way Daniel was saying, how everybody's an addict for those dopamines?
I think there's definitely should be a specific focus on children, because I'm not a psychologist, but research shows that their brain is not fully formed yet. So obviously this attention economy doesn't have the same impact it has on us adults. But you're right when you say that everyone should be protected from these, being exposed to illegal content or being addicted to watching live streams. I think it's not just kids. There should be a specific focus on kids, but it concerns everyone. And so we also need more awareness raising from civil society organizations, from governments, from the regulators themselves. I know it's easier in some countries than in some others. In France, we have the chance of having ARCOM, which is one of the biggest regulators. It's not huge, but it's one of the biggest in the EU. And imagine in Belgium or some other small countries, it's even more complicated for them.
Yeah, and they're not exactly huge, as you say. I mean, they received 112,000 complaints about Kik and JP last year. They have a total of 2 to 4 people working through these complaints. That gives you a sense of the scale, and they're one of the bigger regulators. That's before we even start to talk about new regulations. That shows the lack of resources that we can actually, as a country that's struggling for finances, that we can afford to give towards this kind of thing.
Peter O'Brien, I want to thank you so much. I want to thank Jessica Gedisser, Evelyn Linder for joining us from Oslo, Danielle Trottier in Rotterdam. Thank you for being here in the France 24 debate. There's more on this topic on our website, france24.com.